Oh, welcome to the Russ Joy Show. I'm Russ Joy. Figured that out because it's the name of the show, and you're smart. What's not smart is the meltdown that my computer had this morning. Let's see. There we go. Now we're back. I went to start the show 6 minutes ago. 8 minutes ago? It might have been longer. Thought everything was good. Went to start the show. Computer had a meltdown. I was like, do I do the show on a laptop? No, I don't. Laptop would be bad, very bad. So anyway, we're here. We're here later than expected, which sucks, but here we are. Eagles pick up a big win over the weekend. Pick up a big win on Sunday against their cross-state rivals, if you want to call them that. In the Battle of the Keystone State, one team looked like they were legitimately Super Bowl bound, while the other looked anything but. But I want to welcome you into the show today because it is a massive, massive day if you're an Eagles fan. Like if at any point over the last few weeks you've had any real hesitance about supporting this team, if you've had any legitimate concerns about whether or not they're the real deal, I think that Sunday has to kind of put all that to rest. I would argue that there was a case to be made that that kind of fear should have been put to rest probably against the Ravens. But if last week against Carolina was enough to freak you out, if that was enough to make you think that, like, all right, there could be problems in the locker room. Brandon Graham, we broke all this down last week. The Brandon Graham quotes, the A.J. Brown saying passing. If you were legitimately concerned about what that was going to look like and whether or not this team was about to fall down the same horrible, dark rabbit hole that they found themselves in last year and down another collapse like they did last year, I think that at this point we can kind of put that to rest. I do. And I think that if you watched the game and you actively paid attention to it on Sunday, you'll agree the passing game very much looked back. In fact, Jalen Hurts met with the media directly, immediately after the game. And he was very pointed with his words to, I don't know, you could call it the media, you can call it to the locker room, you could say to the fans. But Jalen Hurts, as soon as he sat down and met with the media, had a very, very simple thing that he wanted to say. And so before we do anything else, before we dive into anything else this morning, I want to go back over, and I want you to hear exactly what Jalen Hurts had to say. It's like 6 seconds worth of Jalen Hurts material. But this is what he had to say to the assembled media as soon as the Eagles got off the field, and he sat down, kind of channeling, this looks like some early Attitude Era Triple H. Here's what Jalen Hurts had to say to the assembled media.
So that's what y'all wanted to see, huh?
That was it. So that's what y'all wanted to see, huh? The man went and he balled out. He did exactly what I think anybody who had any kind of remaining hesitancy around this team wanted to see. Jalen Hurts, who had thrown for 118 yards against the Ravens, who had thrown for 108 yards against the Panthers. Both wins. I mean, the Eagles just kept winning, but the people who were in their feelings about whether or not this team could actually be an elite passing team, Jalen Hurts went out and answered the call against the Steelers. Now, overall, the game had some highs, it had some lows. There are a few really big takeaways that we're going to get to here in a second. And for those who might be, arguing that, like, well, Pickens wasn't in the lineup for the Steelers, how do you expect the game to be closer? We're not even talking about that side of the ball yet. We are specifically talking about what happened on the offensive side of the ball. Jalen Hurts on Sunday, 25 of 32 for 290 yards, 2 touchdowns. They never even got Saquon Barkley going and rolling in this game. He ends up with 65 yards on 19 carries. Kenneth Gainwell ended up getting a nice share of the snaps, a nice share of the plays in the second quarter. At one point, Barkley goes out, doesn't make his way back in until the second half. And in his stead, Gainwell comes into the game. He ends up with 20 yards on 7 rushes. Hurts had 45 rushing yards of his own and got a touchdown. So the Eagles' ground game in aggregate still over, what was that, 100? It was 125 yards, 126 yards on the ground. Now, sure, you didn't have a big Barkley performance. Josh Allen goes out, probably wraps up the MVP. So if there was any hope that Saquon Barkley was going to be able to pull off the very rare non-quarterback win for the league MVP, that probably died last night between the Josh Allen performance and Barkley not having another 100-plus yard game, not finding the end zone. Now, if Barkley goes and picks up the required yardage to break the all-time rushing record, does he maybe end up back in the conversation? If Josh Allen and the Bills fall off here a bit down the stretch, does that change? Maybe, but to this point, Josh Allen's got a very legit case to make. They handed the Chiefs their only loss. They took down the Lions, put up 40-plus points on the road. Very close to an onside kick recovery, to that being a very interesting, final 25 seconds or so of that game. But, the Barkley MVP thing is probably done. But we get back to the passing game because that's really what mattered the most on Sunday. The return to form of Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Devontae Smith. It was a big game. So Hurts has 290 yards through the air. Here's your breakdown because, I think if you look at the final stats and you're kind of doing the eye test and you're kind of doing the mental gymnastics of trying to recall everything that happened, you might believe that A.J. Brown had more yards, more receptions. You probably know that he has the same amount of touchdowns or had as many as Devontae Smith on Sunday. But did you realize that Devontae Smith actually finished with more receptions than A.J. Brown? A.J. Brown goes for 8 and 110. Devontae gets 11 receptions for 109 yards. So both of your big money, big name wideouts, your two number one receivers that you are blessed enough to have on this team, those guys absolutely ball out. They cross the 3-digit receiving yards threshold. They each score a touchdown. Oh, and by the way, Kenneth Gainwell, who did a nice job on the ground, also had 40 receiving yards. Calcaterra had a nice 22-yard pickup on his lone reception in the game. Barkley got a couple of passes. Not a bad day at the office. And again, this is where the Eagles end up being significantly more dangerous across the board, is when you're able to put on film the kind of effort and the kind of overall performance that you put out there in the passing game. Everybody in the league knows that when Saquon Barkley wants to get going and when this offense wants to get him the rock, pound the ball, and beat you to a pulp in the trenches, this team can do that. The real question from some people of late has been, do the Eagles have the ability to turn it up a notch and to return to being an elite passing team? We talked about this last week. The Ravens, despite the fact that they've got this absolute beast in the backfield in Derrick Henry, they still had a top 10 passing attack. The Eagles haven't been there. The Eagles passing game, I believe entering last week, was 31st in the league. It was very close to the bottom. And yet they had arguably the best running back in the league, arguably the best rushing attack in the league. You need to try to find some sort of balance. This effort against a very strong Steelers team certainly should do a lot to dispel the notion that this Eagles team is very one-dimensional. I'm going to go out to some of the comments here. Then we're going to dive back into the game because there were a few big moments that we also have to talk about. And one of them was on the defensive side of the ball. And actually, one of them didn't even happen on the field. But we're going to go out to the comments here. Andrew Fawcett with a morning all. We've got Ford, go Birds, get the number 1 seed. Storybook ending would be to beat the Chiefs in the Super Bowl and have Jalen Carter sack Mahomes 3 or 4 times. Let's go. Ford is all in this morning. I love to see a little bit of positivity out of Ford. Clearly wasn't thinking about the basketball team. Jamie with a good morning. Let's see. We've got people going back and forth in the comments. Andrew Fawcett says, I would love to see the Eagles beat the Chiefs. I'm sick of Mahomes. Mahomes is now hurt. The interesting thing, if you're the NFL right now, is that, presumably Mahomes is going to sit out this upcoming week, but they're going to want him back in for the Christmas Day game on Netflix. That is an absolute killer to the league. If after all the money Netflix spent on being able to broadcast a Christmas game, if you don't have Mahomes, rough. That is rough. Very bad. Bad, very bad. Jamie says that she'd love to see a Buffalo-Phillies Super Bowl. That would be a lot of fun. I don't disagree. It'd be a high-scoring game for sure. Jay Grebby with a good morning. Also notes some hockey talk here. Dissension in Vancouver. Rumored they'll have to choose between Miller or Peterson. Wouldn't be bad to get in on the Peterson sweepstakes. I happen to know a hockey team in Philadelphia that has 3 first-round picks. Maybe we'd like to go back and get a little bit of karmic payoff because they didn't take Peterson or McCarr or Heiskin, and they took, what was his name? Nolan Patrick. Yeah, Nolan Patrick. Chris Freed over on YouTube. Barkley's chances of breaking the single-season record and or winning the MVP award ended yesterday. I totally agree. Kind of touched on that, but it's a little bit of a bummer. I think it's a legitimate bummer. Let's see. Chris Freed also says Taylor Swift has caused the Chiefs' offense to stagnate. I don't know if that's exactly it. Maybe. Probably not. Let's get back over here. Andrew Fawcett says Russell Wilson finally lost a state rivalry game. So here's the thing. Russell Wilson, I am shocked to some extent by what kind of a comeback he's had this year. I think most of us, many of us, even the people who were really big Russell Wilson fans, such as myself, we share the same name. It's kind of important that Russells support Russells, right? There aren't many of us. He also has the 2 S's, 2 L's. I have the 2 S's, 2 L's. We have to support each other. I don't know what person has 1 L, and I feel bad for that person because it makes absolutely no sense. It's just, I don't get it. But Russell Wilson with the Broncos looked like a shell of himself, and he has had one hell of a resurgence this year, and good on him. And by the way, I know that we are a very Philly-focused show here, but Russell Wilson was efficient when he had the ball, which is actually one of the things that we're going to talk about here in a second. Goes 14 of 22, has 128 yards through the air and a touchdown, no interceptions. The game did not lie on him. Again, they didn't have Pickens, which is really your big threat to blow the top off of a defense. We're going to get there, though, because Russell Wilson didn't have many options and many opportunities in the second half, which is actually a testament to not only the Eagles' offense, but then also just how good the Eagles' defense was on the day. Just checking over here. I'm doing a really quick scouring. Landros2 says Pittsburgh stacked the box. Wide receivers were the play all day. I mean, what is we all know this across all sports, right? The thing that you know is you figure out what the biggest strength of the opposition is, and you figure out a way to shut it down. And yes, they stacked the box and made Saquon Barkley's life a living hell on a lot of plays. And it just opened up the secondary. And all of a sudden, your number 1 wideouts, they ate consistently on Sunday. Let's see if there's anything else I wanted to get over here. Jay Krebby says, named my son after Nolan Patrick. Poor kid. I hope that's not true, and if it is, Jay, we'll find you a different Nolan. How about Nolan Smith? Nolan Smith had a nice game. He's had himself a nice season. Maybe that's the one that you change it over to. I don't know. Maybe. Perhaps. Chris Freed also doesn't like Russell Wilson, says he's a jabroni. It's a shame. Jay with a little bit of clarification here. Named him Nolan. Wife and I liked the name after, and just happened to be right after we drafted Nolan Patrick. Thought he'd be a can't-miss stud. Nolan is a good name. So you could do, Nolan Ryan, Jay. You could rely on that one. That's fine. All right, let's get back to the football of it all, because that's really what this is all about today. Well, it's what a lot of it's about. You'll notice on the thumbnail and in the episode description today that we're also going to talk about the basketball team. If even briefly, we will talk about the basketball team today because they are an abject disaster and things have gotten worse. But before we get there, let's stay positive. Let's continue to talk about your team, your town, your Philadelphia Eagles. The thing that I mentioned before is that this Eagles team limited the opportunities that Russell Wilson had in the game. In fairness, early in this one, there were a few possessions that gave you momentary pause, but for the most part, the Eagles defense stepped up in a big way and had a strong first half against this team. We've talked now for a few weeks about what happens in the absence of Brandon Graham being your best pass rusher. What kind of guys are going to be able to take the next step and try to get to the quarterback? You had Nolan Smith record a sack. You had Josh Sweat get a sack. You had Jalen Carter causing absolute pandemonium and mayhem. Actually, Jalen Carter had a very good game. Jalen Carter also had a moment in this one that caused a bit of a riff potentially on the sideline, which some people looked at as being a very big negative. There were a couple of other plays in this game that were problematic, but here we're going to throw this really quickly over to the play very late in this game that could have been a legitimate momentum shifter for the Steelers. And it was Jalen Carter taking a swing, and it pissed off Nick Sirianni something fierce. We're going to go out to this really quick. So I'm sure you've all seen this, but if you haven't, I mean, he throws an open hand swing, and that could have been bad, very bad. And that actually led to Nick Sirianni trying to get over to Carter to talk to him on the sidelines the next time that they were both over there together. And that's where you saw a massive man, an absolutely massive man, Clint Hurts, the defensive line coach. I think we all kind of laughed when we saw the guy's name at first. We're like, that's just a massive human being. But Clint Hurts got in the way of Nick Sirianni, who apparently was trying to go up to Jalen Carter later on. Clint Hurts gets in the way, appears to try to kind of calm him down. You got Big Dom in there. So this could have been the next thing to overshadow things, right? So let's do a little bit of the breakdown here. You got Sirianni trying to get around. Now you got Big Dom behind Nick Sirianni. You've got Jalen Carter over here. There's his skull right there. There's Jalen Carter, big man. Clint Hurts is an absolutely enormous human being. Looks like the mountain from Game of Thrones. Clint here will not let Sirianni around. It's bold, position coach, very bold. Then you start seeing this back and forth. Now, here's Big Dom with the hand. Now, this is a critical moment in this interaction. Is you see the hand here. Now, Milton Williams is over here as well, probably looking to keep some peace. But Big Dom puts the hand on the shoulder, reassures Sirianni that he's there to support him. Now, these two get a little bit close. There's kind of it's probably very loud in the stadium. Now, Big Dom has changed his own positioning. Big Dom went from the backing up Nick Sirianni to now getting behind Clint Hurts, because it seems like Sirianni maybe gets a little bit more heated. And now you've got Big Dom, where you're like, we have two big dudes now. All right, we got two big dudes in between. Jalen Carter's not even paying attention. He's got a big smile on his face. He knows the defense has been largely dominant all day. Now, this isn't quite like CM Punk a couple of weeks ago on Monday Night Raw telling Seth Rollins, I don't even think of you. I don't even think about you. Now, Big Dom goes over to approach Jalen Carter. Clint Hurts and Sirianni, they have their own moment over here. And now it looks like we've calmed down. Big Dom starts to engage here. Now, what I did miss along the way here is Williams going through. So Williams kind of, he splits the gap here, and then he goes over and talks to Carter. So there might have been people who were really worried for a second. Like, what does that mean? Is this going to be the thing that comes out and overshadows the game? The answer is no, it didn't overshadow the game. In fact, this is why I say this show is fair and balanced. We report, you decide. I'm going to show you exactly what happened, because not everybody saw this, and I did see some people on the Twitter after the game that were freaking out about it. But just in case you didn't see, with 8 minutes and 11 seconds left in the game, Jalen Carter and Nick Sirianni hug it out on the sideline. So if you at any point, if you have a drunk uncle, if your dad, your father-in-law, somebody around you texts you this morning and says, do you think that's going to be the end of the Eagles? I want you to send them that screenshot. Let them know. They hugged it out. Everything was fine. This was almost really bad. Not really. Anyway, that's your moment away from the field that you go, oh shit, not again. Please don't let it happen again. Now, I've seen a lot of people saying that with Jalen Carter, these are the kind of plays that you just have to accept, the open hand smack. That he must have gotten himself into such a pissed off state. He was just seeing red, and that was it. He's just going to listen, I am fine if Jalen Carter becomes a disciple of sorts of Ndamukong Suh, okay? I don't want him to be a dirty player the way that Suh was perceived largely as a dirty player. I don't want to see Carter out stomping guys on the hand. But I don't mind Jalen Carter making those kind of plays as long as he can back it up, as long as he continues to collapse the pocket, as long as he continues to contribute in a significantly meaningful way and helps to lead this defense that once again held a team to 21 or fewer points. Now, why did the Eagles defense hold Pittsburgh in check? It wasn't just because Pickens didn't play, And it wasn't just because the Eagles forced a lot of 3-and-outs, especially early in this game, never really let Russell Wilson get into a flow. It's because of what happened in the possession battle. That, I think, is honestly the biggest takeaway in this game. And it's amazing because when you think about it, the Eagles worked so hard to get the passing game back up and running, and they did find success on the ground. This Eagles team held Pittsburgh to 2 possessions in the second half. 2. Like, that doesn't happen. You have to have sustained success on a couple of fronts. You have to be unpredictable as an offense, and you just let that clock run. The Eagles ended up with, I think almost 40 minutes of possession in this game, which is insane. And the fact that they were able to shut down this Steelers team early and then just not let them get on the field in the second half was absurd. So if you're looking for another big positive takeaway, it's not only did the Eagles defense not break again, they really didn't even have to bend that much. The Eagles offense late in this game, in the second half, was so dominant and so able to take a possession from, I think, the 3-yard line late in the fourth, that they were able to just practically run the clock out and give Russell Wilson little to no time. The Eagles finished with 39 minutes and 52 seconds of possession in this game. That's pretty damn good. Like the end of this game, their final possession was 10 minutes and 29 seconds. The fourth quarter, as we all know, is 15 minutes. 10 minutes and 29 seconds to end the game. One single possession. That is a whole other level of dominance. And that is maybe where you start to take a look at the head coach and you say, all right, I might have to apologize. I was not familiar with your game. Because for everything to go right, for you to burn 10 and a half minutes of game time, of actual live game time, that has to be a well-called game. That has to be a well-called offensive game. And it has to be well executed. Now, does that come down to Kellen Moore? Is that Nick Sirianni? I think in this case, it doesn't really matter. If it's both of them, it was a collaborative effort, that's fine. I don't care. That is a kind of dominance that you don't see many teams find the ability to execute. That is just absolute possession football where you have broken down the opposition. Again, in the trenches, Jalen Hurts largely was kept relatively clean in this game. Now, sometimes the pocket collapsed. It happened a few times, and he was able to get out of it. Pittsburgh had 3 sacks on the day. But I wouldn't say that, Hurts was fearing for his life. He was constantly running for his life. In fact, we've now gotten to this point with the last few weeks where you've seen Jalen Hurts, while some like to say that his initial intention is when he doesn't get the first read, it's immediately to tuck and run. I think you've seen him go through more progressions. But what you do see is that he's willing now to tuck, and he can run, and the explosiveness is back, which is the thing that makes him much more like MVP runner-up Jalen Hurts than whatever we saw at the end of last season. So that's that is another really good positive to take away from this game. So the passing game is back. The rushing attack was still effective even without Saquon Barkley being able to blow open big rushes and him to be able to get into a legitimate rhythm throughout all 4 quarters. It was a dominant game. The 27-13 final score, to me, wasn't even as indicative of how dominant of a performance the Eagles put together. It was not good. It was good on both sides of the ball. Now, the Eagles did have a few turnovers in this one. They did have a couple of fumbles that ultimately could have hurt them. One was a Jalen Hurts that was punched out by a TJ Watt. Not a great moment. But this Eagles team continued, and then there was the other one, Cooper DeJean gets the ball punched out on a punt and gives Pittsburgh a short yardage opportunity. This defense kind of holds. This team figures out a way that when they're faced with adversity, in this case, a couple of bad fumbles that give Pittsburgh a short field, they're able to still overcome it. And this defense has been so damn dominant that at this point, if you have any reservations about the defensive side of the ball, I don't know if we're watching the same thing. Now, there was a good moment in this game, something that I tweeted about that I was very encouraged by. And it was that Quinyon Mitchell stepped up in a big way for Darius Slay. Big play Slay. He went and just swung on a dude. So we're going to, there's a good angle of this from the end zone that was not shown on TV. This was filmed by a fan. But like when you talk about how important of a mix this team has between veterans and young guys, and how important it is to have the young guys believe in those vets and vice versa, this to me is one of those moments that stands out. So we're going to go over here. This is when Slay gets kind of put onto a sled and slammed into the wall. And I want you to see what Jalyx Hunt and Quinyon Mitchell do to step up for their teammate. All right, so here's one of the things that we saw on the telecast. Here's Slay getting put onto a sled. And he keeps getting shot. Now the play's over. The whistle has blown. Slay's at the back of the end zone. In theory, the contact should end here. It does not. So Slay starts swinging. Good on him. Washington's a massive human. Look who comes in. Look who's in there almost immediately to defend Slay. If you needed another reason, there's Jalyx Hunt. And then look who comes in around here. Quinyon Mitchell goes right at Washington. Goes right, I don't know who this was, right next to him. But when you think about what kind of a message this sends, right? When you think, like, because there's Washington. Like, Quinyon Mitchell's trying to get through to Washington, who put Slay on the sled. When you think about what makes a good team and what makes a great team and what makes a cohesive team and what makes a team that is willing to go to battle for each other, I'm going to take you back here one more time. This is it. Slay doesn't give up. I mean, he's given up, what, maybe 100 pounds to Washington? Washington's a big-ass dude. Slay swings. That's just like a flat-out right hook. You see it happening. The ref can't do anything. They kind of split. Jalyx Hunt runs in. He's ready to throw down for a vet. And I love what Quinyon Mitchell did here. I absolutely love it. Because that, to me, like when we go back to early in the year where I said, hey, Slay and CJGJ, you got to do a better job. Like leadership-wise, you have to do a better job. Can't hop on podcasts like Slay did with Micah Parsons and kind of trash your teammate in CJGJ. Like that can't happen. It sends a bad message. This team around the bye, it feels like something clicked. It feels like something happened, and this locker room got itself together. And now when you see the young guys are willing to go to battle for those vets, that to me is the ultimate sign that there's something special about this team. And I honestly take that moment and I say, all right, you have the Jalen Carter thing that's a momentary, immature, and probably uncomposed moment. It kind of settles, right? You'll talk to him. You'll try to put that off to the side. But then you juxtapose that with what Mitchell and Hunt did there to go to battle for Slay. That tells me that that defensive unit right now is locked in for one another. And when you have your teammates going to battle for you each and every week, putting their bodies on the line, and they show, especially in the case of Mitchell there versus Washington, massive human being, massive mound of a man. That to me says this team is as together and as tight-knit of a squad as you could possibly have. I'm going to go out to the comments here really quick, then we're going to move on to some other stuff. Dersh is not a fan of Big Dom. Says Big Dom is a headache and a distraction at this point. The less he's seen, the better. Landros disagrees. Says, I like Big Dom. Landros also doesn't, no, you don't accept what Carter did, immature, but you use it as a teaching moment. He's one mean big dude. That's what I'm saying. I think that there's just a certain element to this where, like, if you are the Eagles coaching staff, you don't want to coach the nastiness out of Carter. You want that dude to be as disruptive of a force and as feared of a force, as I said before, as Sue was, right? Like, you want that kind of guy up the middle. You want that guy to blow up pockets. You want that guy to get to the quarterback. You want that guy to work in tandem with a Jordan Davis to shut down the run game. You want that guy to be the nasty first thing that your line sees. You want that guy to be the one that your quarterback has to look in the eyes as they're lining up. I don't want that coached out of him. I'll take a boneheaded play from a guy every now and then, as long as it doesn't cost your team the game. Now, again, could that have been a momentum-shifting play? Maybe. Could that have been a play that, gives the Steelers the ability to go downfield and maybe put up some points? Maybe. I have a lot of faith in this Eagles defense, however. There just haven't been teams that have been able to get up on them. Which now leads me to the next thing that we have to do. Okay? Which is we have to do our semi-weekly look at the rest of the NFC. Because the Lions losing to Buffalo now throws the NFC playoff picture into a little bit of disarray. Not a lot, but it certainly makes it a much more open race for the number one seed in this conference. And so we're going to throw this over. Throw it over. So everybody can take a look at the same thing. As if you people haven't spent the last, 12 hours looking at it together. Or individually. Or sending it around the group chat and you're trying to figure out how does this work out for the Eagles? How does it work out for the Lions? How does it work out for the Vikings? The Eagles will win the NFC East. The commies, it ain't happening for them. The Cowboys are still a mess. The Giants are the Giants. The NFC North is where things get interesting. So we know that the Eagles have 3 games remaining, right? Eagles have the Commanders this upcoming Sunday. Then they have the Cowboys the following Sunday at home. And they close out the year January 5th at home against the Giants. That should be 3 consecutive wins. That Giants game really shouldn't matter unless you're trying to battle for the top spot in the NFC. Which then leads us to this. Because the NFC North is where things get really complicated. The Lions and the Vikings play each other on the final week of the season. That could presumably not only determine who wins the NFC North, but it could theoretically lead to who wins the NFC. Now, obviously, if you're an Eagles fan, you are rooting hard against the Vikings tonight. But they're playing Chicago. And the likelihood of them losing to Chicago at home is very low. If Chicago can somehow pull out a miracle, the Vikings then have Seattle at Seattle, home against Green Bay, and on the road against Detroit. Now, in theory, if Minnesota wins out, they get the number 1 seed in the NFC. Realistically, they shouldn't win out. And then you take a look at Detroit, because if you presume that one of those NFC North teams are going to be the one that is going to actually give you a run for the number 1 seed in the conference, well, who do the Lions have left? This Sunday, they're in Chicago, taking on the Bears, who will be coming off this game tonight, Monday Night Football, against the Vikings. Then they're at San Francisco, who are effectively out of it now. And then again, you're playing at home, hosting the Vikings. Now, I'm not going to stand here and tell you that I know exactly how this is going to play out. But I would expect Minnesota wins tonight against Chicago. We have a 3-way tie on record. And then it gets into those final 3 games. Should the Eagles beat the Commanders? Yes. Should the Eagles beat the Cowboys at home? Yes. Should the Eagles' backups be able to beat the Giants at home in the final week of the season? Yes. Is there a legitimate chance here that the Eagles win out to end the season? Yes. And if they do, they finish the season 15-2. Now, if you are Minnesota, you pick up a win tonight, you're 12-2. Do I see a scenario where Minnesota could lose a game down the stretch? Do I think that they could lose at Seattle? I think that there's a decent enough chance that they could lose at Seattle. Seattle's been very good. Now, they haven't been particularly great at home. They're 3-5 on the season at home. Oddly enough, Seattle's been a better team on the road. They've only lost once on the road this season, so they're a little bit of an anomaly. Do I think that Minnesota could maybe lose at Seattle? It's certainly in play. Do I think that the Packers could go on the road and beat Minnesota? I think there's a chance. I'm not saying it'll happen. I think there's a chance. That takes you to the final week of the season. Do I think that the Lions could beat the Vikings? I do. So if the Vikings don't win out, and the Eagles do, the Vikings are out for the number 1 seed. If Detroit wins out, the Eagles still end up with the number 1 seed in the conference. But let's just say, hypothetically, the Eagles want to see the Lions lose because that maybe allows them to rest their starters, and then that final game, you do get to play the backups against the Giants and still pick up a win. Do I think that the Lions will lose to the Bears in Chicago this week? I don't. Do I think that they'll lose at San Francisco? Probably not. So, like, there is a path here that Detroit could win out. Either way, if you're the Eagles, you have to control your own destiny. You have to win out. If you care about having the number 1 seed, which I would, you need to win out and then let the 2 NFC North teams do whatever they're going to do. And you obviously hope that Minnesota picks up a loss along the way and they're out of it. I would rather see the Eagles go after the number 1 seed hard, have that first round bye, and maintain home field advantage throughout the playoffs than I would want to see the Eagles accept the number 2 seed, essentially give their guys the final week of the regular season off and have the first round bye and then come out. Like, I don't love the idea of not having your guys play in the final week of the season. I don't care that it's the Giants and that you maybe worry that in a rivalry game there's going to be like a dirty play. I'm not that concerned with that. I'd rather see this Eagles team make every possible move to try to get themselves the top seed in the conference, because I do think that if you finish the season on, what is it then, a 13-game winning streak, if you wrap up like that, holy shit. You want to talk about like riding an actual high going into the postseason. That's the way to do it. Now, could the Commanders put a real scare in the Eagles this week? That is possible. I'm not going to rule out the possibility that Washington could maybe put a scare into you. But then you have Dallas and you have New York. And that Dallas team is horrific. And that Giants team is even worse. But we'll see. I'm going to go out to the comments. Let's see if anybody feels differently or how we're feeling about it. Ford says maybe the Commanders this Sunday, I guess, is a team that could maybe give the Eagles a run. But he also agrees they need the number 1 seed. Andrew Fawcett says Sunday could be a good test. Maybe go to Wawa's and get a shorty. Watch the Eagles game in Fishtown. I can't do a Philly accent. I won't even try. I think it's gross. I think the super strong accents, whether it's Philly, New York, Boston, just like, gross. Ugh. Andrew Fawcett also calls out the control what you can control. That's all they can do. Cliche? I don't think it's cliche. I really don't. I don't. So that's where we're at right now. The Eagles very much are in contention to make a legitimate push and hopefully get the number 1 seed in the conference, because that's what it's all about. Now, I will tell you this. 2 things. If you haven't done so already. 1, make sure you click that thumbs up and subscribe to the Russ Joy Show on YouTube. We're close. The drive to 500 subscribers. It just has to happen at this point. Somebody's got to win the jersey. We got to get to 500 subscribers, and then I randomly select a subscriber to the channel to win a jersey of their choice worth up to $175. Listen, at this point, you send the show to your great Aunt Gertrude, or you make a Gmail account on behalf of your grandmother, and make sure grandma starts, you figure out how to get YouTube on her phone or her tablet or her TV, right? Because we want her to be an actual person who's watching the Russ Joy Show. Maybe then she all of a sudden starts interacting in the comments section. Maybe pretty soon, Grandma Batilda is getting into it with Ford on YouTube. Wouldn't that be something? Anyway, the drive to 500 subscribers. As soon as we hit it, I'm going to randomly select a subscriber to the channel. They win a jersey of their choice. Like, what are we doing here? You can subscribe to the Russ Joy Show over on YouTube and also wherever you get your podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Amazon Music, Google Podcasts, which is now YouTube Podcasts, and Pandora, or wherever you get your podcasts. I don't care. Wherever you get them, you go take care of that. Go subscribe. Okay. Now we have something else that we have to do, because I have mostly been swearing off of talking about the basketball team until I felt like they were worth talking about again. And you all know that I love the Sixers, and I love the idea of the Sixers, but I haven't really loved what I've gotten out of the Sixers this year, which has been a ton of injuries. It's been a ton of disappointment. It's been a bunch of bullshit that's been spewed by the organization, by the head coach, about the plan, about Joel Embiid being hurt, not being hurt, ramping up, not ramping up, pushing Marcus Hayes. Well, then we picked up a couple of things that hurt you even worse. We have a couple of things that have now taken what was already a bad Sixers season and probably made it even worse. So on one hand, you have Joel Embiid taking a forearm to the face over the weekend against Indiana. He goes down. You get a bunch of ridiculous troll accounts that go out of their way to say that Joel Embiid is soft and that, he should have gotten up, and why is he laying on the ground, and what a bitch. Like, it was all over, right? Then we find out that Joel Embiid did, in fact, fracture his sinus. Now, as somebody who's had a deviated septum and had surgery for it, it's not the most pleasant thing. Is it the same thing? Well, in theory, a deviated septum is kind of a little fracture up in that business, and then it heals, and you can kind of have like a crooked interior of your nasal areas. Now, should Joel Embiid have gotten right back up? I don't know. But here's the thing that makes it look bad. If you like to do your sport-by-sport comparison. Tom Wilson, and this has been kind of like the cliche thing to go to, but if you haven't seen this before, Tom Wilson, like about a week or so ago, also fractured his sinus. And I want you to see what Tom Wilson looked like, because he went back out. He missed like a shift or two, and then he went back out and he scored 2 goals for the Caps. I just want you to see what Tom Wilson's face looked like after he had a fractured sinus. This is Tom Wilson. Now, if you follow hockey, virtually everybody in the league hates Tom Wilson. But this was Tom Wilson after fracturing the sinus. He took a puck to the face. His face does not usually look like he has a baseball tucked inside of his cheek. And he went back out and he scored 2 goals. Now, you could certainly sit back and say, Russ, they're not the same sport. Russ, Tom Wilson's a hockey player. They get punched in the face from the time they're small children until they're adults. Perhaps he's got better bone density. This is Joel Embiid's 3rd facial fracture. Now, I don't know. Do the bones get super thin because they're just like stretched because he's so tall? I don't know. Do I think that Embiid should have come back out with a fractured sinus? Probably not. Should this be something that takes him out for 6 weeks? No. I haven't seen anything that says or has indicated in any way that he's going to miss extended time. But the dude has to get back in. He's going to have to wear a mask. The team cannot afford to have Joel Embiid out for multiple weeks now as you try to maybe get yourself back into the playoff picture. Now, the thing that I keep running into is, I've said on the show a bunch of times, if you can get back 2 out of 3 of those guys at any given time, 3 out of every 4 games, you'll make the playoffs because the Eastern Conference isn't particularly good. And then I get wonderful people like Ford who will then tweet at me and say, hey, do you still think they make the playoffs? Well, no, because, yes and no. I didn't exactly expect Embiid's face to break yet again. Okay? I didn't have that on my bingo card for the 2024-2025 season that he was going to pick up another facial fracture. Okay? So that was another thing. But that wasn't the only bad thing that happened this weekend, because, one of the most positive stories to come out of the season is the rookie Jared McCain. And I don't know what he did to piss off the basketball gods, but he's also out. And he's out indefinitely because he told the team, hey, just so you know, not really sure what this is, but my knee hurts. And so ESPN put this out, I believe, first, so we'll throw it to ESPN. But Jared McCain has a torn meniscus. Now, I am left to wonder, okay? I'm not a big, the sports gods, praying to the basketball gods or the hockey gods. Can we just find out who did what to piss off whatever entity oversees the karmic justice to the National Basketball Association? Can we find out who we have to make an offering to? Can we take Andrew Bynum's knee brace and serve it up to whatever basketball gods are currently just hating Philadelphia? Can we do that? What did Jared McCain do? Are the basketball gods mad that he paints his nails and he does TikTok videos? Not very kind of you, basketball gods. A torn meniscus, the poor guy. So now he's out indefinitely. Embiid is out for who the hell knows how long. I would be just as surprised, or not surprised, to see Joel Embiid come out later this week with a Phantom of the Opera mask like he's worn multiple times in his career. I would be just as unsurprised to see him, maybe not tonight against Charlotte, but Friday when they host Charlotte. Could I see that as a scenario? Because, they need to take off from Monday until Friday. Or you play Monday, we got to wait all the way to Friday to play. So maybe he doesn't play tonight against Charlotte. Would I be surprised to see Joel Embiid on Friday playing at home against the Hornets? No. Would I be surprised if we didn't see him until Christmas Day against Boston. No, that would be horrific, though, because if his conditioning gets as out of whack as it possibly could between now and Christmas Day, that'd be bad, bad, very bad. I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see him until January 6th when they host the Suns. And a lot of games happen between now and then. In fact, let me do the math. 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. That would be the 11th game. So if he misses tonight, he would miss 10 games until they're at home against Phoenix in early January. None of this would surprise me. But here's the problem, okay? I keep saying the Eastern Conference sucks because it does. The Sixers are 7-16. They are level right now on wins with the Hornets and the Raptors, who also have 7 wins. The Wizards are 3-21. You're not going to be worse than the Wizards. All the people who want to see the Sixers tank, I will simply point out to you that the Sixers have played 3 fewer games than the Pistons have. The Pistons have 3 more wins. In theory, the Sixers could catch Detroit. They're 11th in the conference. The Nets are 10-15. The Bulls are 11-15. The Pacers are 12-15. That's 8th in the conference. The Hawks are 14-13. That's 7th in the conference. Now, you can call me nuts, and many times I am. This freaking team still has the possibility of putting enough together that they could maybe make a run to be one of those bubble teams that ends up in a play-in game. That's how bad the Eastern Conference is. I can't overstate to you just how piss poor this year's Eastern Conference is in the NBA. It's that bad. In fact, if you think about, and I got the gestures going now. I'm going to be honest with you. This might be the worst the Eastern Conference has looked in at least 5 years. The fact that you could have teams like the Sixers, the Hornets, and the Raptors only 4 games back of a play-in game spot. Are you kidding me? That's how bad the conference is. So no, I'm not willing to say, yes, the Sixers will make it, because I've been saying they could compete for the 6th seed. That's before the Embiid fracture and the torn meniscus on McCain. But do I see a scenario here where the Philadelphia 76ers could end up in a play-in game, end up with one of the last playoff spots, get blown out by Boston in the first round? Yeah, I could. Do I think it's better for them? I don't even know. Because here's your problem. If you want to make the argument that the Sixers should tank now, just be garbage and go get Flag in the draft. I mean, long term, I guess it helps you, right? If you think that Maxey and McCain are going to be the answer, and getting that guy is going to help, and that you'll be able to maybe turn the page, or I don't know how you're going to try to trade him, but if you wanted to try to trade Joel Embiid, or down the line try to trade Paul George and just turn the page on it, in theory, I guess you could try to make that case. I still look at it as there is a non-zero chance that if you were able to get Joel Embiid back and relatively healthy for the playoffs, and Paul George relatively healthy for the playoffs, and Tyrese Maxey, I don't know. I want to see basketball. I want to see winning basketball. I would like to see playoff basketball. I would like to watch the Sixers maybe make some kind of a run. I know it's entirely antithetical to how I feel about the Flyers, but if you're going to just punt on this season because Embiid is hurt again, fine. But remember, the number of seasons that Joel Embiid might have as an effective basketball player are coming to an end. There will not be a resurgence here where he has a 6-year career playing at MVP level. That ain't happening. If you want to shut Joel Embiid down for the rest of the year, maybe have him get the knee surgery that he apparently passed on so that he could play in the Olympics, or so that he wouldn't miss a good chunk of the season, now might be the time. Get him sinus surgery, get him the knee surgery, and try to have him ready for next year. If that's how you want to do it, you can. I don't know if it's the right call, and I don't know if it's going to make things actively better for you as a franchise. But if that's the way that you want to go, you can. Now, does that piss off Paul George, who certainly didn't come here to be a guy who was just going to be part of a quasi-tanking team? Probably won't sit very well, but I don't know what you could do at that point. I'm sad. I wanted the Sixers to have a good year, and it just ain't shaping up to be a good season at all. All right, let's go over to some of the comments. We were talking about Tom Wilson a little bit ago with the fractured sinus. Andrew Fawcett said he's an animal. Hockey players are tougher than everyone. Chris Freed said he looked like half a chipmunk. Ford asks, is that a baseball in your cheek or are you just happy to see me? Jamie remembers seeing that post-game. It is crazy. It's nuts. Ford says, what matters the most is that Embiid played in the Olympics, LMFAO. Landros thinks that Embiid is going to be out until the new year for sure. Andrew Fawcett says Embiid has a hangnail. He's going to miss the next 8 to 9 months. Situation is fluid. Jim Dronick says, looks like Michael Corleone after Chief McCluskey busted him up about Tom Wilson. It's a good call. It's a good callback. Andrew Fawcett asks, did Iverson put a curse on the team? Also notes that this is probably the drones. That's exactly what happened to Embiid. It was the drones. Which, by the way, we haven't talked about them today. We're not going to because I don't need the feed to freeze up like it did on Friday. That was not great. But that actually does remind me. I don't know why this reminded me of it. But there was some... can we do a little radio wars here before we leave? Because I want to end on a positive note. Because I saw this. I got very excited. Okay? So we had a little bit of radio wars last week. And I mentioned... Was it last week or the week before? I did the radio wars thing about how... Mike Missinelli called out the WIP afternoon show for stealing his show ideas or whatever, right? But then there was like another thing that happened, and this happened last week, and it happened over at the Fanatic. There was a certain host who went and spoke in very big, sweeping generalities and very clearly didn't want to come out and say entirely who he was talking about. But there was somebody over at the Fanatic on their afternoon show who called out someone else on the team. And so I wanted to go out to that person really quick because I found it interesting. I'll share a thought here on who he's probably talking about. But we're going to go out to Tyrone Johnson because Tyrone over on the Fanatic afternoon show, which if you didn't hear it, I don't fault you for it. Not a lot of people probably did. But we're going to go out to Tyrone Johnson because he apparently alluded to the fact that he was going to expose somebody from the station. So I want you to just hear really quickly, what did Tyrone have to say about somebody else who works at the station? Then we'll see if we can figure out who he's talking about.
Who talks about team acted the first time he saw me after my grandmother died? Or should I tell the story of what happened when I filled in for him one time and what he put in writing about how he wanted me to do? Which story should I tell later on this hour, since team is what it's all about?
Want to pick? You not like...
Well, the answer then is both. That's the answer then, will be both. The answer will be both. I've been quiet. I make a sacrifice. That rather than say thank you, the person decided to take shots. I don't like that. That's all. Well, let's go back to the text messages at 610-632-0975.
It's a great moment. Now, listen, I am here for being petty. I myself am a petty little bitch sometimes. No doubt. But Tyrone Johnson, who's Tyrone talking about? He's talking about Missinelli. Has to be talking about Missinelli. I will take people back for those who might have forgotten. But there was the headphone toss years ago where Missinelli and Tyrone get into it during a commercial break. Missinelli throws his headphones kind of down and in front. I had been told that led to a formal complaint filed to HR with Beasley, likely from Tyrone, about a hostile work environment. Now, again, that was a couple of sources who threw that out there. Did I ever, confirm that with Beasley? I did not. So, in fairness, journalistic integrity, a couple of people threw that out. Now, there clearly was not a good working relationship between those two. And Missinelli had this very unceremonious departure from the station where he showed up one day and said that he didn't have a contract with Beasley and that was it and it was going to be his last day, which is not typically what you would expect somebody who's had as long and as successful of a run as Missinelli had with the Fanatic. It clearly spoke to there being some kind of beef. Joe Bell, who was the VP of Beasley media in the Philly market, had his own unceremonious ousting earlier this year. Shortly thereafter, Missinelli comes back. Okay. When Missinelli came back to the station, the scuttlebutt on the street was that obviously that was not going to sit well with Tyrone. Why? Because they had a breakdown, relationship breakdown, communication breakdown. The end of the tenure with Missinelli there wasn't great. Tyrone ends up taking over the afternoons for Missinelli as part of a collective, if you remember back in the day with Ricky Batalico and Broads, the best show ever. And somehow Broads ended up being the fall guy, the scapegoat for bad ratings, despite the fact that it wasn't his show and despite the fact that what was supposed to be an ensemble show became very much the Tyrone and Friends show. He has to be talking about Missinelli. Now, Kevin Kincaid over at Crossing Broad did a little bit more of a breakdown where he said earlier in the hour, Tyrone had talked about team player in reference to Missinelli. But, like, who else did Tyrone fill in for on the station before he was the afternoon guy? Missinelli. I mean, I don't remember a time that Tyrone filled in on the morning show. Could he have been talking about Gargano when he was doing the morning show? Unlikely. Was he talking about Bob Cooney? I can't imagine so. Bob Cooney's not there anymore. It's probably Missinelli. So that leads you to, if you want to have your popcorn ready, I mean, they cross over, right? Like there's a crossover period where like one guy has to leave the studio as the other one comes in. Missinelli does middays before Tyrone and his crew come in for the afternoon show. I mean, Tyrone didn't go on to tell a story. He didn't tell the story about what happened after his grandma passed, and condolences. I don't know how recent or long ago that was. Condolences there. But the grandma passing story, and then there's the other story about what was put in writing. I don't know what that means. Does that mean that he said in writing, like, if you ever fill in for me, I want you to do X, Y, Z, don't do this, don't do that? Was it in writing, I hope you fail the next time and I can show that you're a fraud? Like, I don't know. We don't know what the contents of that letter were. But I found it interesting. Listen, there are a couple of people at the Fanatic who have jobs on the air who there are many people that don't want to work with. That is not a secret. I am not breaking news. I am not telling you something that people who work at or around that station don't discuss with other people. There are 2 people employed at that station right now, at the very least, that a lot of people actively don't want to work a shift with. I can't help that. I have nothing to do with it. I don't blame Tyrone if there was some kind of beef, if there was something that happened around the death of his grandmother and he felt like somebody was disrespectful after that. He absolutely has the right to be upset. Was it Missinelli? I don't know. We could just take a little bit of context clues and probably put together that could very well be who he was talking about. All right. Zach Gochekson says, joining late. Hi, Russ. Love the Fanatic slander. It's not even slander. It's like, I have these moments where I sit back and I remember what the Fanatic was when I was in college. And it was Mark's Embrace. It was Bruno and Mays. It was Missinelli, like legitimately like tearing it up in the afternoons. And I think back to that station being the first one to go to FM. They had their app. That was the one that like my friends and I, who were not from the area, we listened to the Fanatic. We like that's what we did. And we loved that station. And I think about in the course of, what are we at now, 15 years, 13 years? I'm trying to think the last time Bruno and Mays were on the air in that slot together. I mean, it was definitely at least 08, 09. So you figure like 15 years ago, what the trajectory of that station looked like it was going to be versus what it is now. It's not even close. I don't mean that to be rude to the people who are on the station. There are some very talented people at the Fanatic. There are some other grifters who are there. I can't help that. I think there's just been a lot of terrible mismanagement at that station over the years. I don't know anything about the current program director there. I know that program director has reached out to some people about potentially doing like some weekend slots. And then I don't believe any of those people have ended up on the air. That doesn't mean that the weekend people who are there suck. The ratings are dismal. I mean, like I have heard that the ratings are virtually 0 on the weekends. I have offered up on this show and over on Crossing Broadcast over the past however many months that if they were smart, they would just reach out to podcasters in the area and they would just have those shows either syndicate on the weekends or they'd have those people go in and try to do their own stuff, use their own short form content, try to engage a new audience and try to disrupt the weekends. But the Fanatic doesn't do that. They just kind of they keep rolling out the same shit. And I guess if they don't shut the station down, they're happy to pay very little money to the people who host on the weekends, and that's it. And they can sell some kind of advertising on the weekends, even though the ratings are practically nothing. And everybody just like gets to go home happy. But like if it were me, I'd be kind of mad, and I would kind of like actively want to do whatever it takes to try to at least make an impact on the weekends. I don't know. Some of the people that I've heard from that have had a conversation about weekend slots have been left just kind of going like, I don't know. I don't know what happened. Like we talked. It didn't go anywhere. Nothing has happened. I don't know. People need to, I don't know. Somebody should just apply a little bit of pressure over there. I don't know why it's not happening. But anyway, Jamie says, yes, another installment of Radio Wars. Jay Grebby notes about Tyrone's, thing there. Put the other two on the show in a really uncomfortable spot. That's true, which is, you can't do that. That is one thing that I will say. And I've done enough of this at this point that, like, even with Ant and Bundy, there are times where Ant and I, like, have this, these weird interactions on the show where he thinks it's a funny, good content, and then after the fact of time, I don't think it was that good of content or that funny. Like, we probably shouldn't do that. We had one of those in the past week, and then we, like, told the people on the next show that, like, that wasn't a real, actual riff, but it kind of felt like Dad and Dad are fighting again. But, like, you can't put your co-hosts in a very uncomfortable spot. And there is nothing to be gained from trying to air out dirty laundry with somebody that you don't actively like at the station. That doesn't work. It doesn't resonate well with the listeners. It doesn't resonate well with the people who work at the station. It looks petty. It's effectively the same thing. I mean, listen, what Tyrone did is akin to what some people would say A.J. Brown did by saying passing last week, right? Like, it's very clear who he's talking about. And, like, it puts everybody in a no-win position. Like, what are you going to do? If you're at the station, like, what are you going to say? If you're one of the co-hosts, you say, yeah, hell yeah, Tyrone, tell everybody. I don't know. Weird. T from the TO3 notes that Tyrone did weekend mornings. Okay, I did not know that. I don't know who he would have filled in for. Because I, like many people in the city, I guess, just don't pay attention to the weekends on the Fanatic. Tony Louis says, Tyrone got my boy Broads fired. Haven't listened since. He was the only one on the station that actually knows hockey. Broads also understands, like, the internet fans, understands short form content, understands, like, he's built a very nice YouTube channel. Like, he does a lot of the things that the Fanatic should have been trying to build around and replicate, and he's the one that they got rid of. I don't get it. Again, like, he wasn't the lead voice on that show. What I think was supposed to be a ensemble show is certainly not. And from Jump Street was turned into the Tyrone and Friends show, which they should just rename it the Tyrone and Friends show. Andrew Fawcett says, sports radio in Philly is way too dramatic now. It's like Real Housewives bullshit. Jamie takes offense to that and says Real Housewives is more entertaining. Let's see. Zacho says they really don't know puck and never talk about our team, our town, the Flyers either. Major factor for me, no comparison with all the great pods available now. I think that's fair. I think it's totally fair. I think if you own the rights to the team, you should at least be able to talk about it. And especially with the Sixers being down the way they are, like, no station is going to go out of their way to actively talk about the Flyers. They're not. But, like, if you have a Flyers caller, you should at least have a general understanding of the team and, like, their form and, like, what's been going on, that you could put together, like, a coherent thought. I will tell you, like, I think I've said this on the show before. We had proposed to Joe Bell, who used to be the VP at Beasley, years ago. We said, put us on for Snow the Goalie 1 hour a week on the weekend. We will draw an actual, meaningful audience to the weekend on the Fanatic for 1 hour, where people will know, Flyers fans will know, this will be hockey talk. We can get a Flyers player on, we can take calls, we can do whatever. But, like, give us an hour, and it'll be fine. We had somebody reach out to us who was affiliated in some way with the station last year. I was like, hey, would you guys still be open to doing something like that? And we said, yeah. And I said, here's our price. Because you're not going to pay us $50 an hour, whatever the bullshit rate was on the 610 days. It's like, you have to actually pay us because none of us live in Ballackinwood, and none of us are going to, like, drive down there to go take, like, less money than it's worth in gas to go do shows. I think some people think that, like, a lot of these radio fill-in people, make like good money. They don't. They're trying to get themselves to a position potentially to like take on a bigger role. The pay at the Fanatic, from what I have gathered here, unless you're in one of those main chairs or you have had a long-standing relationship with the Philadelphia sports fans or you bring a bunch of sponsors to the table, the money's not great. But we were willing to do it. We would have said, here's our price. We'll do live shows. We'd propose to the Fanatic. We'll do live shows. Can do it at a bar. You guys can take half the money. We'll take the other half, or you take this, we'll take that. It died on the table. No idea why. They own the rights to the team. They have nothing going on at that station. I don't get it. I've never understood it. Let's go over here. JH asks, is Brody still doing weekends there? He does a lot of overnights at WIP. I think he did like he did some 6 to 10 stuff, I think around, or like some posts, like after the final out for the Phillies over the summer. He'll end up making it. Like he'll get a bigger role at some point. I would almost guarantee it. He's doing exactly the kind of stuff that these stations are going to have to pivot to at some point to remain relevant. WIP will always be relevant as long as they have the Eagles and the Phillies rights, and they've re-upped with both of them. So like they will remain relevant. The Fanatic, on the other hand, like I don't get it. I don't understand. And JH also knows. So Jamie points out that Broads is on WIP now. JH says, again, shows how little I pay attention to the weekends like everyone else. And then Zach O asks, you guys did this on 610, right? Back in the day, we did Snow the Goalie, Crossed Up, and Crossing Broadcast. All had different stays on 610. And the funny thing was, back in the day with 610 ESPN Radio, most of the people who were on that station paid the station for the time. Like they wanted to be able to, maybe for like advertisers or whatever, right? They wanted to say, hey, we have a show on 610. And they thought that paying the station to be able to be on the air was like really good for them. And in our case, we were trying to work on a larger media partnership between Crossing Broad and the Fanatic, where Crossing Broad was going to Crossing Broad was going to write content that would either syndicate to the 97.5 site, or the Crossing Broad people were going to write like specific content for the Fanatic site. Like that was going to be this like content partnership. And apparently when it got out that was in the works, a bunch of the Fanatic people at the time freaked out because they didn't like Crossing Broad because of all the radio war stuff. And so what we kind of agreed to in the interim while they were working on the content deal was we'll take some of the podcasts and we'll go over to 610 ESPN and we'll go do those shows. But we were pretty adamant that, like, we're not paying you for that airtime. We should get paid, at the very least, we should get paid a small fee for the gas money to come down and do it. And, like, in fairness, we did good shows. Crossing Broadcast, it was like me, Ant, Kevin Kincaid, Bob Wankel, a four-headed monster of a show that actually came off like a morning show in the afternoons, which was pretty enjoyable. And then Ant and I would go down and do Snow the Goalie. And it was on at the same time that Missinelli, I think Missinelli's last hour was on the air. And like we were getting callers to a 610 station that nobody gave a shit about. Unfortunately, the people who were the station management at the time, that was Eric Johnson and Coach Camille, could not be bothered to listen or to consider giving weekend time. And the thing that I always laughed about, and I still laugh about, is that the VP of the market, Joe Bell, would actively email Anthony and be like, great show this week, or that was a really great show, that was great. And we'd say, hey, have you talked to the guys who run the station about doing a weekend slot? No. You're the boss. You're the boss's boss. You're the boss of the people who make the decisions. Stop emailing and saying what a great show it was if you're not actually going to follow through. So we did that up until right before COVID shut down the sports world. We kept doing those shows, and then the content partnership between Beasley and Crossing Broad like effectively died. And they said, all right, we're just done doing the shows. And COVID shut down the sports world, and that was the end of it. But it was fun. I liked doing radio. I thought it was a lot of fun. I don't know. You do a totally different thing. A radio show sounds even different than this one does. I enjoy the comments. I enjoy going back and forth this way. It's a totally different thing when somebody calls you up. It's a different thing when you get to feed off the energy of other people in the studio, a producer behind the glass, maybe a co-host with you. It's like a totally different thing. I actually do miss that. It's one nice thing about doing Press Row Show now is that we've got Ant and Bundy and intern Andrew off on the side, and like That to me is what it's supposed to be about. That's the fun. That's the bringing the energy in each and every way. Like, that's what I love. All right, anyway, we're going to go back over here really quick, and then we're going to head out because I've taken the show way longer than it was supposed to go again. I'm sorry, but what can we do? Jay Grubby asks a hockey question. Speaking of Flyers, is Cam York here next year? No extension rumors yet. He's an RFA. He'll be back. Unless they get a really good trade offer for him, but I think he'll be back. Tony Louie responds to that, says, let York go to arbitration and see what they say. That'd be so interesting to me. I actually have this fear that they're going to kind of go like the Owen Tippett route, and they're going to give York a really big contract at a higher than they probably should AAV, and you just have to hope that it works out for them. They seem to roll the dice on these guys that the value is going to be great and that the cap percentage is going to be lower as the cap goes up every year, and they're going to sell themselves on it, but I'm not sure that I love it. I'm really not. Kevin Cooney, who does weekends over at 97.5, checks in and says, hi, Russ. Hey, Kevin. I've talked to Kevin before. I think Kevin does a nice job. Do I think that Kevin gets the support that he probably needs at the station on the weekends to promote his show more? No. I think the station does a very bad job of promoting their weekend people. They have social media channels. They have and I don't know for a fact, but my assumption here is that they don't run the cameras for the shows to stream to YouTube on the weekend. They should. Could they stream those out to Twitch, to X, to Facebook? They could. Do they? I don't believe they do on the weekend. Are there ways that the Fanatic could better support their hosts on the weekend? Yes. Do I stand by the belief that at some point, somewhere in the weekend lineup, they should have podcasters with significant followings and significant subscriber bases? They should reach out to those people? Sure, I do. That doesn't change. We'll see. Okay. Reed DeFord says, want to talk about John Marks and Darren Ravel not knowing what a plane looks like. We are not going back into the drone talk. The last time we did that, the stream froze. I am not going back to the drones. I refuse. I flat out refuse. We're not doing it again. I did see a lot of people, though, this weekend that are like, these people they're taking pictures of planes. But it's like if you cross-reference the flight paths versus what some of these people are catching on video, they're not the same. So I don't know. Ford giving Kevin some props, by the way, saying your show is good with D. See, there you go. We have some nice positivity in here. You don't get a lot of positivity in some other comment sections, but you do here. You check in here on the Russ Joy Show. People are nice, and they have their very nice things to say to each other. Zach O goes back to the Flyers really quick, says, I see York as being a big trade chip. We need some more center depth, and we need more size on the team. Love York, but he ain't huge. That's true. Maybe the resurgence of Jamie Drysdale, if it proves out between now and the trade deadline, maybe it does make York a more attractive trade piece. We started off the show with this thing about Elias Pettersson maybe being available from Vancouver. That would be interesting. Dylan Cousins apparently also available from Buffalo. Hasn't had the best year, but he's 2 seasons removed from, I think, 31 goals, 37 assists. Could that maybe be interesting to the Flyers as a potential top 2 center on the team? Again, if you're looking for distressed assets or you're looking for things to trade some of these picks for, a 23-year-old center might not be the worst idea. Certainly is a different look. In the case of Pettersson, it's going to cost you a lot. Is it going to be worth what you'd have to trade him for? I don't know. Maybe. We'll get there later. Landros with a little bit of Sinatra here. Send in the drones. All right. I think we're good. I think we're good for today. And Andrew Fawcett calls the comment section a happy, dysfunctional family. Jay Grebby with a massive trade. York, Risto, Farabee, Frost for Pettersson. Who says no? Vancouver. They'd have no reason. Risto is going to go to a team that is trying to actively compete to be a Stanley Cup contender. And the Flyers are probably going to have to take a bad contract back to make the math work. I don't think it'll be Vancouver. Toronto always sniffs around Risto. It hasn't happened yet, but that doesn't mean you give up. The Maple Leafs might end up being his ultimate suitor. I'm not sure. Okay, so we have that. Let's see. All right, I think we're good. I think we're good for today. I want to thank everybody who checked in over on the in the comments section on YouTube, X, and Facebook. I want to thank everybody who checks in after the fact on X and on Facebook with comments after the show is done being live. I want to thank everybody who subscribes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, wherever you get your podcasts. I'll be back Wednesday. Remember, the show through the end of the year is Monday, Wednesday, Friday. We're matching the Eagles. We would like to have the ability to react to the Eagles the next day. So here we are, Monday, Wednesday, Friday. Wednesday we'll be back. We'll probably do a little bit more of a Flyers and Sixers-centric podcast, unless some Eagles player goes out and says something stupid, in which case we'll break all that down. But in the meantime, make sure you subscribe to the channel, The Russ Joy Show on YouTube. Subscribing to the channel gets us closer to the drive to 500. And when we hit 500 subscribers, one randomly selected subscriber to the channel will win the jersey of their choice worth up to $175. So if you haven't done so already, make sure you go subscribe, share this episode with some friends, with some family. That could be your Christmas gift or your Hanukkah gift or your Kwanzaa gift or your winter solstice gift to the people you care about most in your life. Until Wednesday, I've been Russ Joy. This is the Russ Joy Show, but you already knew that because you're smart, and it's also the name of the show. I will talk to all of you Wednesday morning here on the Russ Joy Show. Have a great day, everybody.